Hey, how's it going, guys? This is your boy Haze, and today in 8.2 we're going to be doing an Icecap PvP guide for them Battleground Brawling. And the reason being is obviously you've got to get up to that Blood of the Enemy rank 3, and that's going to take 50,000 total honorable points grinded up to reach that rank 3 spot. And I'm currently at rank 2 on my way to rank 3, and know that the grind is kind of crazy. So today's video is going to be all about how you can enjoy yourself in them Frosty KBGs and manage to top them meters. So let's do this.
It's who we are, it's what we do, we've come so far, and now we pay the price, so don't even cry. The world is breaking down, and I cannot leave the ground.
Real quick, we need to go over some talents. As for the level 56 talents, we're going to be using Inaudible Assault, as Icy Talents really doesn't increase your DPS that much, and Cold Heart, obviously in PvP, not very fun, doesn't do that much damage. So moving on to level 57 talents, we're going to be using Runic Attune just for the increase of Runic power, because either you are playing the Gathering Storms build or you're playing the Frost Strike build. Either or, one's going to be focused more on survivability and gathering Runic power, while the other one's going to be more focused on getting Runic power to drop large Frost Strike. So either or, Runic Attune's going to play out better for either of those specs over Murderous Efficiency or Horn of Winter. As for the level 58 talents, we're going to be using Asphyxiation. You could be using Blinding Sleep for a little bit more CC on targets, but personally Asphyxiate just turns out better, especially when you have to take on DPS versus DPS. Blinding Sleep in those situations doesn't necessarily play out to be the best. So as for the level 60 talents, if you want a little bit more burst on your just your burstiness in general, you can go Avalanche for a little bit more AoE cleave, because it does actually boost it up quite a bit in terms of Blood of the Enemy, since it does increase the overall crit chance of those abilities when it comes to AoE. But I personally like to stick with the Frozen Pulse, just because it kind of synergizes really well with the Icecap build, and it gives you overall better consistency for your DPS when you're dumping runes than simply, you know, not taking it and relying more on your Howling Blast procs, because you're really not going to get too many of them unless you're playing the Remorseless Winter build, which you will get a little bit more, which will benefit a bit more from Avalanche. But if you're not playing the Remorseless Winter build and you're playing the Frost Strike build, I would definitely say stick with the Frozen Pulse. As for the level 75 talents, we're going to be using Death Pact for that increase the survivability and self-healing. It's really something that's going to be needed, because you're going to get caught off guard, blasted with a few Chaos Bolts, blasted with a few Pyros, which your Death Strike really can't heal through that well, and you got to be able to peel off and get back inside of your group one way or the other. So you're going to be taking Death Pact for the most part. You can't take Wraith Walk for a little bit more mobility if you're getting locked down a lot, but realistically Death Pact's going to be the way that I would go the majority of the time for avoiding being killed. As for the level 90 talents, we know Gathering Storms is going to be the way to go regardless of those two specs you're playing in PvP, since Glacial Advance is just kind of a waste. It doesn't do really that much damage, and it consumes Runic power, so you don't get that for your Death Strikes or your Frost Strikes, considering which spec you're actually playing. As for the other level 90 talent, Frostworm's Fury, which I don't know why they nerfed that thing so bad that it's like completely unusable at the moment. I mean, Chill Streak hits a lot harder than Frostworm's Fury, so if that tells you why you shouldn't use a 3-minute cooldown, a 45-second cooldown hits harder. Much harder, actually. As for the level 100 talents, obviously this is going to be an Icecap focused video. Literally, you could use Obliteration with this same variation of this video, just the opener on your rotation would be slightly different, but besides that, it's basically the same video with the same rotation and the same survivability based on what you're using in terms of Remorseless Winter or in terms of the Frost Strike build. So when it comes to PvP talents, when I'm doing Battlegrounds and I'm brawling, I like to stick with Necrotic Aura just for the increase of 8% magical damage, and reason being is because whether I'm playing Remorseless Winter or I'm running the Frost Strike build, generally the majority of my damage is going to come from frost damage. Also, things like Chill Streak is going to get quite a big buff from that, determining what spec you're actually playing. But obviously a lot of these are interchangeable. If you need to survive, you can run Anti-Magic Zone. If it's a long lengthed out battle where you're trying to outplay a healer's cooldowns, go with Hard Stop Aura. But if you just want to like just do raw damage, just cleave the crap out of people and have quite a bit of survivability, Necrotic Aura, Transfusion, Chill Streak is definitely the way to go for Battlegrounds right now. If you need a little bit more, let's say you're having problems sticking on target, whether it's your internet lag or you just are kind of incapable of doing it, you don't feel like you're transferring from target to target smooth enough, Death Chill is also an option. I mean, there's a lot of things you could run, but But right now, when I'm doing Battlegrounds and Brawling, this is the setup that I like to use. And specifically because Transfusion, obviously, it's a very short cooldown. You can heal quite a bit. It's going to be what really keeps you alive, aside from Death Pack, the majority of the time when you start taking damage, because you really do need to counter burst a lot when it comes to casters at the moment. So it's like it's a definite need for Frost at the moment. As for Chill Streak, now this ability was probably one of the most surprising abilities. I mean, I was like 50-50 about it. I didn't expect it to hit as hard as it did, but I did expect it to hit quite a bit harder than most people thought. And a lot of people are kind of mad at this talent and stuff like that. Personally, I think this talent's just kind of like that cherry on top when you want a little bit of that extra burst, a little bit of that extra damage to kill somebody, because if used correctly, this ability alone can take off 50% of somebody's health. Or if it's just a single target for just a single person, a quick 70k smack with that thing is a definite surprise coming from a Frost DK that a lot of classes and a lot of players don't necessarily expect. So talking about some Azerite talents, there's kind of two base variations I like to play, and it's all determining what kind of circumstance I'm going to be standing in. Now, as for the current one, this is the Frozen Tempest Icy Citadel build, which is generally something we use in Mythic Plus, but the reason why I like using it so well in Battlegrounds, especially without a healer, is it opens up a lot of your DPS to using Death Strikes instead of relying on your Frost Strikes to actually put out a lot of pressure, since the majority of the time your damage is coming from Frozen Tempest, it's coming from your melee attacks, and then when you actually set up your burst, it's going to be coming from your Chill Streak, which is something we're going to talk about in just a second on how to set that up. Basically, you set it up just like Frostman's Fury or your Icy Chains. So with this setup, your opener is fairly simple. It's going to be basically the same thing as the other setup, because Frost Strike, the majority of the time, the way it's set up and the way you hit hard with it, you use it as a filler anyways, so it's not necessarily something that's going to change your rotation by switching out these Azerite talents. So, talking about how we go and burst on this target, we got a couple different bursts we can do. We can do a quick burst where we open up with Pillar up front, throw out Remorseless Winter, use Blood of the Enemy, and then completely sink as many obliterates into the target as possible until you've reached about 10 seconds on your pillar. Maybe you can hold it off to 8 seconds, determining how hard you want to hit with the opener on that. But you can go ahead and throw that out around there, and that thing's going to hit for generally around 40k on average. It can hit up to 70k I've seen, which is absolutely crazy. And if you're running the actual Frost Strike Azerite build, the Frost Strike Azerite build, which I'll switch over to real quick for you guys. Obviously, it's going to increase latent shield damage on your Frost Strike, but the other thing it's going to do is increase your trade winch, which is going to increase your mastery if you're running 2, or if you're running 3 1500, it's going to increase your overall frost damage by a lot, which is also going to increase your overall chill streak damage, and that's how you're able to reach those like 80k chill streaks, those 80k frost strikes, because I noticed a lot of people on the forums are very confused on how the heck I was even able to reach those 80ks when they go in DPS on a dummy and their frost strikes are hitting for like 10k. It has to do with your Azerites and your stat priority. You have to have the correct ones, otherwise it's not going to work correctly. Now, as for these Azerite traits, obviously, we got Latent Chill. The way that you actually benefit from those large Frost Strikes using Latent Chill is you need to become Rune Starved. Now, you have to have at least 3 empty runes, which means 3 of these runes have to be on cooldown for you to reach that higher tier of Frost Strike. So basically, you're sinking all your runes still, and then you're relying on Frost Strikes as filler. Like, it's literally the same thing. It's just your Frost Strikes are going to hit seriously harder, and that is actually the spec. Like, I'll play the Frost Strike build if I have a healer with me, if I've got some kind of consistency, something to keep me up other than my own self-survivability, because the difference between this and the other build is this spec, you're not going to want to dump your runic power healing into death strikes, because simply you're going to want to use your runic power for your frost strikes, because that's going to be your big damage. But if you're playing the other spec, which is what I like to do when I'm brawling, you don't really have to worry about that nearly as much. So what we're going to go ahead and do on this target, well, I'll show you guys quick burst first, and then we'll talk about just ramping up altogether, just like the maximum amount of burst, and that's essentially just waiting for procs and then bursting with your procs. So there really isn't much of a difference between those. You're going to burst generally the same way regardless of whichever of these specs or builds you're playing. So we're going to go ahead and open up on this target. We're going to go ahead and throw up our Pillar of Frost. We're going to go ahead and throw up, now there's something that I like to do in PvP. I like to throw my Blood of the Enemy before I use Remorseless Winter, but because of how these DPS dummies work, it's really odd. If you use your Blood of the Enemy before Remorseless Winter, it won't count your DPS from Blood of the Enemy, and it'll make your damage look a lot worse than it actually is, which I assume it's because Blood of the Enemy doesn't really register as bringing you into combat, which is really weird. But we're going to go ahead and open up on the target here. We're going to go ahead and throw up our Pillar Frost. We're going to throw up our Remorseless Winter. We're going to use our Blood of the Enemy. And then we're going to open up with that insta-cast Howling Blast. Now, you won't necessarily have the Howling Blast with the other build. You'll just go straight to Obliterates. But obviously, with this, you're going to have an insta-proc Howling Blast running the Remorseless Winter build. So you're going to throw that on the target. And then you're going to drop 1 or 2 Obliterates, and then you're going to hit your Chill Streak. Now, Chill Streak is kind of an interesting talent because you can either use it early during your burst where it deals more overall, or you can wait near the end of your burst so you can actually hit harder with your Chill Streak, but do slightly less overall because it's going to fall off after your cooldowns. But you're not necessarily losing nearly as much of the damage because of the fact that you're running your Icy Citadels, and you're going to be able to retain a lot more of the strength. So let's go ahead and actually open now that we're done talking. There's just so much to talk about when it comes to this spec. It just opens up a can of worms, boys. All right, let's go. All right, throwing up our pillar. All right, throwing up our Remorseless Winter for the Insta-cast. We're going to throw up Blood of the Enemy. Obviously, we're going to rely on that. We're going to throw out that Howling Blast to do a lot of DPS. Drop about 2 of those on the target. We're going to go straight into our Chill Streak. Around this time, we're going to pop your Empowered Rune Weapon and throw out some of them big Obliterates. And you're just going to go ham on the target and deal an insane amount of DPS. Now, as you can see, Chill Streak hits like an absolute monster. Alright guys, you see that? Chill Streak, 60k. Even if that doesn't bounce, can you imagine what people are saying when they get hit by your 60k Chill Streak coming off on the target? So as you can see from my rotation here, you just keep up your Obliterates, DPS on the target, and then use your Frost Strikes as filler if you're trying to apply max damage. In terms if you're taking damage, let's say you're getting the absolute crud beat out of you, all you would do is basically change up your rotation slightly to where you would use your Death Strikes over the majority of your other abilities. Fairly simple to do to stay alive. The other thing you want to focus on, obviously, is when it comes to your Death Strikes, you really want to Death Strike after taking a lot of damage, since it does heal for the percentage amount of damage that you take. Now, going over a couple of healing things like Transfusion, we might as well touch on those while we're standing here getting punched in the face. Transfusion is a 45-second cooldown, guys. Do not be afraid to use Transfusion if you hit like 80% health. Reason being is because Transfusion's on a 45-second cooldown. It's very short, and it'll come off cooldown very fast. It also generates a little bit more of a runic power there for you, so you really aren't going to be runic starved through it, and you really can just rely on those Death Strikes right there to kind of make you reach the alternative cooldowns you have, like Anti-Magic Shell, Icebound Fortitude, and of course things like Death Pact. Death Pact you generally don't use until you've reached around 30-20% health, or if you're just trying to counter some major bursts, like you are at 50% health and then you see incoming Mage Pyros, so you're definitely going to have to catch those beforehand, otherwise you're going to get slapped. Like, you really got to watch those. But that about does it up for our DPS and our healing capabilities. I might as well show you guys like total burst, but for the most part, when it comes to the Icecap build, I feel like the overall consistency is going to be a lot more important than, let's say, maximizing burst damage. But I mean, obviously, they're both going to be important to synergize them correctly. So maximizing burst damage on a Frost DK right now, especially since we have this really great Chill Streak build that we can come up with. Essentially, you wouldn't pop Pillar right away. What you want to do is run in on a target, pop Remorseless Winter when you touch them, and then just kind of slowly start DPS on that target. And I've already proc Trade Winds in Unholy Strength, so I could literally burst already. Like, good luck. And we're just going to deal a ton of damage again right off the bat. Like that, I couldn't have hoped for better procs, literally. Like the only thing that could have procced better right there was literally my Trinket. So, I mean, that kind of defeated the purpose of showing an all-around burst when everything just pops perfectly. Listen here, game. You work correctly when I want you to, but then when I want to show an all-around burst, you're like, haha, joke's on this game, I'm telling you guys. So the last thing we need to talk about is stat priority on the Frost DK when playing the Icecap spec in PvP. Now the first thing you want to stack the ever-living crud out of right now is Mastery, just for simple raw damage from the Frost Strikes, any kind of Frost AoE or Remorseless Winter damage you're going to be dealing, and of course, in terms of Chill Streak, you're going to want to be using Mastery. As for the secondary stat, I'm going to be running Versatility just for the overall survivability, and of course it's going to give you a little bit of a damage increase. Now the thing that people are kind of confused about is whether or not you want to stack Critical Strikes, since that actually the damage crits are halved, but still you're going to need those Critical Strikes inside PvP. So why are we still stacking Critical Strike here if it's not necessarily great in PvP? We simply just want the mechanical effect of the ability to reduce the cooldown on our pillar. It's that simple. We're not completely relying on Critical Strikes to do anything We are, of course, we like the critical strike damage. Don't get me wrong, but we're not relying on it purely for the actual critical strike damage. What we're relying for it on it as a Frost DK is the actual mechanic of getting critical strikes to decrease the cooldown of our Pillar of Frost, not necessarily to do anything else. Now, before, when you saw some of my videos, I was using a minor trait called the Unbound Force, which that thing was literally nerfed really hard into the ground. It only lasts like 3 seconds now, and it only increases your crit chance by it's minor compared to what it used to be. It used to be like it lasts 8 seconds and it gives you 100% crit and it procs really fast. Now it procs slow as heck, and it might only be good when it comes to AoE situations, which still might actually function for Frost DK in the near future, considering our Remorseless Winter, our Howling Blast, and everything like that may actually proc it a bit faster when combined with Blood of the Enemy, which we will have to see in AoE situations since we weren't able to try out the nerfed version single target. So I'm kind of interesting to see that. So there could be a conversion right there from Critical Strike over to Haste if we are able to use that secondary trait, but as it is right now, we are critical strike reliant when it comes to using Icecap. Now, if you don't want to use critical strike, or you just don't like it in general, or you just don't want to use Icecap, you can definitely go a full haste build after versatility into obliteration build, because it's not nearly going to affect it as much since you are guaranteed critical strike chances as obliteration, and you don't nearly need nearly as much critical strike to benefit from this level 100 talent as you do need a lot of critical strike for the other one. So necessarily right now, with the way things are, I'm just kind of avoiding critical strike and haste for the most part and sticking with mastery and versatility. But if I had to choose between the two, if I'm maining Icecap, I still will go into crit. But if I'm going to main obliteration, I would definitely go into haste at this point. But we could see some changes in the near future, and of course I'll update you guys on that. So I wanted to do an update guide video for you guys to just talk about Icecap a bit and let you guys know exactly what's up. As for survivability and trinkets, we might as well just, talk about this. I'm using a burst trinket to increase my damage by quite a bit, and of course I'm using the Sinister's Gladiators and Signaling. Just this is like brawling stuff. If I was going to go into arena, I'd probably throw on some little tanky stuff, kind of like Lingering Spore Pod. I wouldn't necessarily go into Diamond Laced Refracting Prism anymore since it got so nerfed that it's actually insane. But anyways, guys, I hope you again enjoyed this video. I'm going to go ahead and sum this up. Leave a like if you did, and of course, until next time, this was your boy Hazzed.